This is Mike and C, and this is another episode of You Can't Handle the Truth. What's on our slate for today?
Yeah, so again, we're just going to follow up continuing to talk about tort reform. We're going to talk about the 6 different provisions that are up as provisions in the bill, ultimately to go through and be passed and change what's currently the law here in Florida. So we talked a lot about the one-way statutory fee provision in our last episode. So if you want to know more about that, definitely go back into the last episode and watch that, because we kind of break that down and what's happening and the issues with that. The next, I think, biggest issue in this bill, one of the biggest provisions, is changing from a comparative negligence standard, from a pure comparative negligence standard to a modified comparative negligence standard is what they want to do. So you want to talk?
Yeah.
Us an idea about what that means?
I mean, if you go back historically, back in the day, and I don't know when the actual law was changed, but we had what was called contributory fault. So what would happen is, in the context of a trial, you would have someone suing someone else for damages, let's say for personal injuries. And if the jury thought that the person suing for damages was in any way negligent, that person's case would be zeroed out and you lose. That's a simplistic way of talking about it. After that, at some point in time in the 90s or 2000, before I started practicing, we had a system that was changed from contributory negligence to comparative fault. In that instance, under the same set of facts and scenarios at the trial, if the plaintiff was deemed negligent, the jury would be called upon to determine the percentage of negligence of the plaintiff. So for instance, if a plaintiff was deemed to be 50% at fault, at the end of the day, if the jury awarded damages of $100,000, that plaintiff would get $50,000 as a net verdict because they were deemed to be 50% at fault. What this legislation is attempting to do, I believe, is to move back to the days of contributory negligence, where if a jury says, hey, you were a little bit at fault, or at least somewhat at fault, so you're going to be zeroed out. And I think that's an accurate statement, no?
No, that's not what they're trying to do. But that's
okay. I don't even know.
But it feels like that way. Okay. So what,
It does. I still have that feeling. I think it feels that way.
Yeah. So ultimately, in the days of tort, yes, they started out with contributory negligence. Then what happened was we moved to comparative negligence because how unfair contributory negligence was. Not just in Florida, but in every state. But what's happened is each state has decided, well, we're going to have different types of contributory negligence.
Okay.
So in the state of Florida, we have pure contributory or pure comparative negligence. So contributory and comparative can be used interchangeably at this point for this purpose.
Right.
But ultimately, so we're a pure comparative negligence state. What they want to do is move us to a modified comparative negligence state. And what the difference is here in Florida, a defendant pays their fault. If they're found 40% at fault, that's what you recover. Okay. But in a modified contributory negligence standard, basically what happens if you are a plaintiff, you're bringing a claim, and you are found more than 50% at fault, you get nothing. You get zero. And so it's a very kind of, there's a lot of states, apparently 33 other states use this standard, but it's ultimately really unfortunate. And I think it again limits your access to attorney.
So it's got to be 50%.
It's got to be 50%. It's the comparative negligence, or
right.
The modified, it's called modified
right.
comparative negligence.
Right.
I went back in the old Barbary notebook and well, we had to study for the bar. We had to learn that. So it's been a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been a while. It's been a long time, a lot longer than you, correct?
Yeah. So, but ultimately, what's going to happen here is it unfair that this is going to be the standard? Maybe, maybe not. But what happens is there's already cases where there is contributory fault already assigned to plaintiffs, like in trip and fall, slip and fall type case.
Classic example.
Yeah. Yes, you're already going in with some sort of understanding as a plaintiff that a jury's probably and likely going to assign fault to you because either you should have been paying more attention, or you were distracted while you were walking, or you've been at that location 100 different times and you never had an issue. So why did you have an issue now? So a jury's always going to assign some sort of fault. So what happens in this situation is it becomes like an all or nothing type of situation. So attorneys, being business people, are going to look at this as a cost benefit analysis. And ultimately, you never want to have an upset client. So if you're going to have a plaintiff who likely is not going to prevail, you're going to not take the case.
I mean, that's the standard I've used for years at running a private practice. I mean, I tell the clients, I'm very upfront with them. I'll say, if I don't think I have better than a 50% chance of winning the case, I'm not taking it. Not just because we're not going to get paid. We appreciate the business, but you don't want to be sitting at a table, at least I don't, 2 years later, because these cases take time, and having to tell a client that we're not going to get any money, because really what it's about is business. You want to be able to do a good job for your clients, and you can't do a good job for them when you don't have a better than 50% chance of winning, or you're taking a risk, and that risk is going to be, some people will accept some of those cases, but a lot of people aren't, because lo and behold, this is a business at the end of the day. What is what it is. People are like, well, there's greedy lawyers. There's greedy everybody. I've never met one person who didn't say they want to make $1 million or make a lot of money. That's what the American dream is all about, right? Just keep making money. So they're throwing this at us saying, what's the greedy lawyers, the greedy lawyers? We're going to find our way. Anybody that went to law school that has any kind of gumption or any kind of, ambition is going to find their way. So this is not going to, we're not going to walk away with her money. What's going to happen is it's going to be boiled down to the consumer getting screwed because of some of these laws. If we can meet in the middle on some of them, then wonderful, but that's not what's going on here.
So one of the biggest things that's happening, and one of the biggest types of parties who it's adamantly against this change, are motorcyclists. And they're against this because they have a right not to wear a helmet. They have a right not to wear a helmet here in Florida. Right. The governor has said, if you're riding a motorcycle, you have the right not to wear a helmet. Okay. But if I'm a juror and you're on a motorcycle and you're not wearing a helmet, you get hit, I'm going to assign fault to you. Okay. That's
because they weren't wearing a helmet?
Because they weren't wearing a helmet. So basically, if we go to that modified comparative negligence standard versus this pure comparative negligence standard that we already have, then ultimately it takes away their right to choose. Yeah. Because if they're on a motorcycle, they get hit by a vehicle and they're not wearing a helmet, it's going to be really hard for an attorney to take their case, because they're going to say, listen, a jury's going to give you more than 50% of fault because you chose not to wear a helmet. So that's a huge, what's happening right now in all these subcommittee hearings and all these meetings at the House. And there's big groups of bike riders coming up and they're presenting this. And it's like, you're taking away our right to choose in the free state that we live in this beautiful, amazing free state that we live in. You're taking away our right to choose, and you're taking away our rights just in general with this tort reform bill. Right.
I think there's a level of understanding that is not present in a lot of people that vote. I mean, a lot of times nowadays, I mean, it's you're on one side of the coin on every issue, and that goes for Democrat or Republican. It seems like a lot of people are on that side. It unfortunately, when you are like that, it's going to be all or nothing, and that's not really what we're supposed to be about. No. There was a time when if someone would lose an election on one party and the other party would be there to support them, and that may not be analogous to what we're talking about right now, but it kind of is. Because it's like these $1 billion companies are trying to run the world, our little world, the United States, and they get laws passed in their favor. And we talked about David and Goliath in the last podcast. That's what this is. It's not a matter of the lawyers are going to be out and they're all mad. Well, yeah, some of them might be. If you're hinging all your cases on all your practice on bogus cases, I mean, yeah, that's fine. But if you're not, and you're representing people that are actually injured or actually have a claim, then this is going to affect them. So people need to understand that, regardless of what side of the coin you're on.
And not only that, but just if you give an insurance company an inch, they're going to take a mile. So what they're going to do with this is they're going to say, oh, well, if we throw some type of comparative argument in there, then it's just going to make it harder for the plaintiff to pursue their claim. I'm going to make it harder for them. I'm going to make it harder for their attorneys. And then I'm going to just confuse the jury so that at the end they collect nothing. Right. And the insurance company's abuse of this is going to be what we see on our end, right? When we know a client comes in and yes, can you assign fault anywhere? Can you just throw something up that sticks? Sure. Right. And so insurance companies, they already do try and do that. So the abuse is going to be so much more because now drivers are going to know who are at fault. Dependent drivers are going to know, hey, I can just throw some comparative in here, and this person probably won't sue me because guess what? They won't be able to find an attorney too.
Right. And maybe as a compromise, one of the things I don't see on the table is why not just be able to talk about insurance when you're at a jury trial? Because that's who's paying this. I mean, you can't do that. Even though most of the smart jurors will figure this out, they don't want to make any compromises. It's all one-sided. It's never a compromise. It's always to benefit the multi-billion-dollar industry that is insurance. And, that's what we're up against, and we've seen it happen in the past. There's precedent for what happens, whether it's workers' comp we talked about in the last episode, or sinkhole claims where some unscrupulous people got a lot more for what I guess is now not a sinkhole. That legislation was passed, I think, in 2015, and it changed the whole landscape of sinkhole cases.
Yeah. So what? And then
for example,
and for the Floridian, for the consumer, basically now you can't get sinkhole coverage through property insurance. It doesn't cover it. You have to get some sort of umbrella policy that specifically speaks to sinkhole issues if you have sinkholes on your premise. So it really, it really hurt the consumer. It really hurt the Floridian, the everyday person. That's who it hurts.
Right.
Doesn't hurt big insurance. It doesn't hurt the attorneys. It hurts you,
right,
the Floridian.
It's going to hurt the consumer. And ultimately, we're also consumers ourselves, right? Because we purchase insurance and, so.
Yeah, it affects us too.
Right.
Because we are the everyday person.
Right.
So some of the other provisions in this tort reform bill, they have a negligent security safeguard. Basically, they want to eliminate premises being responsible for safety. They want to change our statute of limitations from 4 years to 2 years. They want to cap
on damages, of course.
Which that particular provision has a lot included in it, and is almost kind of, to me, above the pay grade of any legislator to try and work out, because ultimately it's so nuanced, and only experts can really dive into that. Only real true trial attorneys who know the repercussions of this. Only the doctors can create their own fee schedule. Like this is what the caps on damages provision, where they want transparency in damages. That provision is really, really problematic, and I don't even know if it's necessary that we dive too deep into it, because I think that one's going to get sliced and cut.
It probably is.
Only because it's just, you can't be a non-attorney and try and be negotiating that provision.
We'll see where that goes down the road, because we have a few more weeks on this. I don't know if you want to talk about this, the statute of limitations change, because a lot of people ask me about statute of limitations, and I don't know if it's a bad thing what they're trying to do. What do you think?
I think it goes against, one of the things they want to do is avoid lawsuits and create less litigation. But if they change this from a 4-year statute to a 2-year statute, that's absolutely going to create more, because we're immediately going to have to file suit.
It doesn't bother me one bit. And you're speaking to a personal injury lawyer. I don't care whether the statute changes from 2 to 4. I mean, it could, the situation where someone calls you 3 years after the fact, you can't bring a lawsuit. But if anything, it expedites the claims. You're going to see more litigation quicker. Yep. So, I'm not sure where that ties in. Maybe that's their compromise, right? Well, you can sue us quicker now. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really know how the insurance company benefits from that, other than,
not sure.
Like kind of a gotcha tactic. It was 4 years, now it's 2. Maybe somebody didn't get the memo.
Sure.
I mean, malpractice insurance for us is probably going to rise with a 4-year to 2-year statute.
Right. That's a good point. Right. So they're going to make more money on premiums. Right.
The insurance company always winning.
Right. But I don't think any of these are going to be applied retroactively. So if they apply them, am I correct? You can't go backwards. You have to go forward.
They are
the losses
definitely yes, they're definitely putting it's all retroactive. But my big thing is
it is all retroactive.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's all. What's the opposite of retroactive?
Retroactive is backwards. I mean,
but what's form where it's all forward? I don't know. Anyway, I digress. So anyway,
these millennials, I don't know.
None of it will be retroactive. Is that the right way to say it?
Sure. Retroactive means going backwards.
I understand.
Okay.
Did I say misspeak?
I don't know. At this point, I don't know.
So anyway, yes, it will not be retroactive. Am I saying it wrong?
Right.
Okay.
It's going to be moving forward. So if the legislation is passed in March, on March 30, which it's not, by the way, then it's going to apply to accidents that happen after March 30.
Right.
Maybe that's the way to say it.
But my big question is is it just broad spectrum across the board? If it's post,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. If it's post March 30th,
right. In that example,
then there is only 4-year applies in all aspects.
Right.
So if you're already in litigation, it won't be and you need to add a party, there isn't some sort of 2-year gotcha tactic, right?
No, I don't think so. I guess it depends on how it plays out, but no, I don't think so. I think it's going to apply at some point. They're going to say this is the day it's effective, and after that date, every accident happened after that date, it's going to be 2 years. I don't think it's going to affect an accident that happened before the implementation of the law.
Yeah,
is what I was trying to say.
Yeah,
before I started just confusing things.
No, he's sorry. Yes. So we digress. So changing SOL, I don't think, to us, that's not a hot button issue. I don't think that's problematic.
I don't think so.
It'll help expedite claims.
Right.
If anything, it's going to be detrimental to insurance companies because they're not going to have time to investigate properly.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to be doing all their investigating in litigation, which will be, I don't know, a backlog. And there's already a backlog.
Already is a backlog.
So
COVID, we still have a backlog.
Great provision, insurance company.
Yeah.
Next, so
negligent security.
Yeah. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So the classic negligent security case would be, for instance, you're living in an apartment complex. You're the claimant, the potential claimant, and you have there's a history of criminal activity that occurs on the property, which is it's a predicate. You have to have that, okay? And the apartment complex has known about it, and you can prove that there've been not just one incident, but like multiple incidents where they should have increased their security for the residents, and they don't increase it, and then there's a criminal action that takes place. You can get shot, you get robbed, assaulted, whatever, and you sustain damages, and the cause of action would be against the apartment complex as it stands now for their negligence and failure to provide adequate security. Now I think what they're trying to say is that in all those cases, correct me if I'm wrong, when you go to a jury trial, the fault's going to be still apportioned between the apartment complex in that example and the criminal, which most of the time people that are committing those types of crimes, unfortunately, don't have sufficient assets to cover a money judgment.
Right.
So is that kind of what they're trying to do?
That
every case?
Yeah, I guess mandate that the assailant or the perpetrator or the criminal is always on the jury verdict form, so that the jury can assign, essentially, so the jury can assign fault to them. It's not will they, it's they definitely will.
Right.
It's how much. And then basically what happens in that scenario and situation is that individual is not collectible. So the insurance company who insures the property that didn't provide the proper safety and safeguards, they're going to only have to pay for their percentage of fault, which might be a significantly low amount, or less than 50%.
Yeah.
So basically what's going to happen in that situation is the plaintiff is not going to collect their full compensation and coverage. And that's really unfortunate in these situations. And I think what it does is it breeds a situation that's going to create unsafe apartment complexes, unsafe environments. What incentive do these companies have to create safety provisions for their residents or their patrons? They're no longer going to have that, because the only thing as a civil attorneys, we know the only thing we can hold businesses accountable for is to punish them financially.
Right.
And that's what tort law is. That's what bringing tort claims are, is to punish people financially for their shortfalls, for not doing the right thing, for putting profit over safety. And in this situation, it's going to allow for that, and they're going to get off scot-free when they don't put safety over profit.
One of my concerns is that what if it trickles down to instances of, for instance, like of human trafficking, where an apartment complex is knowingly permitting the trafficking of human beings, and all of a sudden now their liability is limited. I don't know, maybe criminally they're not going to be limited, but I mean, the counterpoint to all this is that an apartment complex should not be held responsible for the actions of a criminal. And so that's why I mentioned the predicate, because you have to be able to prove in these cases, not just one isolated incident. This is where there have been multiple incidents, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times of the same activity, sometimes with the same perpetrator. It's not just, this company's going to be held responsible because some criminal walks on the property and commits a crime. That's not what this is about. It's about multiple times and having been on notice. But it could trickle down to instances of human trafficking. The skeptic's going to say, that's not what it's about. It's not about human trafficking. Well, it's not about it yet, but you got to think about the future.
Yeah. And so I think that's why I keep making the distinguishment, these changes are above these legislators' pay grades because they don't understand what it truly affects.
That's a great
Because
point.
they are not PI attorneys. They are not first-party property attorneys.
Right.
Actually, the only first-party property attorney who understands is adamantly against this tort reform, and some of the ones who do dabble in insurance, they're adamantly against this tort reform, even though their body doesn't want them to be. Yes, because they know what this means. They know what this will do.
Yeah.
They know what this will do to the average Floridian, and it'll create unsafe environments with no repercussion. It'll take away your rights. It'll take away your access to attorney, and it will take away your access to court. And it will negatively affect every Floridian, us included, attorneys and citizens included.
So much is talked about, people talk about responsibility and everybody should be responsible for their own thing. And I believe that. I absolutely believe that. Look at yourself in the mirror and be responsible for what's in front of you. However, there's things that are out of your control. And in this case, in those examples, the business owner, if you own a business, you should be responsible for certain things. Not for every, someone just falling on your property for no reason, but you should be responsible to repair your building and keep it up to date, up to code. You should be responsible for making sure that criminal activity is not occurring on your property on a regular basis. I'm sorry, that's responsibility too. If people want to say, well, everybody's got to be responsible, you shouldn't sue people because you should be responsible for your own damages. They say that until it happens to them. And then it's like, well, I don't have the benefit of the law. It happens a lot. Not everybody's like that, but it does happen a lot. And I think that this shifting of responsibility, you got to understand what's going on before you can talk. Not every lawsuit is bad. And
again, always go back to lawsuits are great because they hold people accountable. The last provision is about bad faith reform.
Yeah.
They basically want to change the requirement in third-party cases to be able to tender their limits, essentially. And so the one thing I want to talk about with bad faith reform is this: the only thing that holds insurance companies accountable and keeps them accountable is doing the right thing, because ultimately they could get punished financially for doing the wrong thing.
Right.
That's the only thing that holds them accountable. That's the only reason they do the right thing.
Right.
And this bill wants to change that.
Right.
So really unfortunate. Any last thoughts on this bad faith reform?
Yeah, one thing that we should mention is that, she's absolutely right. Bad faith is what keeps them in check. Almost every profession has something to keep people in check. We have the Florida bar that keeps us in check. It's not like we just run around and do things for the hell of it. And there are repercussions. They want to eliminate, they being the insurance company, any kind of responsibility for anything by just getting rid of all the laws. Because there's no, now that I know of, there's no insurance regulatory body other than maybe the state how else are they kept in check?
Bureau of Insurance, who isn't doing anything.
No, they just accept service of process, right?
Yeah. Did they even do that? I don't know. Not anymore. I don't know.
So much more to talk about, but maybe we can do that next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, subscribe, and comment. Please leave your comments. If you have any specific questions about this tort reform issue, please leave them. Thanks so much.
Enjoy your day.
Bye.